The alarm bells are deafening, and the evidence is irrefutable. Greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel burning and deforestation are choking our planet and putting billions of people at immediate risk. We are on a fast track to climate disaster. This is not fiction or exaggeration. It is what science tells us will result from our current energy policies. This is a climate emergency. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our daily report coming to you from the COP27 Climate Change Conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. I'm KC Schulberg, the Collier County Waterkeeper, hosting these daily shows, along with co-host Dr. John Capece, the Kissimmee Waterkeeper. We are at day 10 of the conference that ends this Friday. So just 4 days to go. 4 days to pull a rabbit out of a hat, or more like a frog out of a kettle of boiling water. Both John and I, probably a billion other people around the world, have been dismayed at the lack of progress at this year's COP. A lot of really smart people, a lot of great discussions, but not one single multilateral agreement conducted between the participating nations. Where is the sense of urgency? When Russia even hints at the use of nuclear weapons, the world snaps to attention and coalesces in panic. Maybe that's because nuclear annihilation is quicker, with the potential to wipe out a whole swath of civilization in the blink of an eye. Well, on humanity's long timeline, that same level of destruction due to climate change is basically happening in the blink of our own eyes. We have 9 years to pull ourselves out of a nosedive that, if not corrected, could spell the end of civilization as we know it. We are hurtling toward world warming of 2.5 degrees Celsius, which would mean an unlivable world for our children. And compounding the challenge, this week during the conference, we hit a landmark. The world just topped 8 billion inhabitants. That means more mouths to feed, more who need to be warmed at night, cooled by day, more who will need to be clothed, more who will want cars, houses, and TV screens, straining our resources to the breaking point. We need an Armageddon moment. We need to treat the climate crisis with the urgency of imminent nuclear conflict. We need an international atomic energy type agency for climate change where inspectors can go in and find polluting offenders or shut them down. And if we can set punishing tariffs and restrictions on countries like Russia and Iran, why not companies in countries that violate their climate pledges? What if we were to forge a climate change Marshall Plan to drive climate solutions overseas? We need to revamp the IMF to unleash climate funding around the world. How about a climate change Peace Corps, where our young people could enroll, travel overseas, and help disadvantaged nations cope? We need to also double our R&D budget from 3 to 6% to catapult private enterprise to the fore of the renewable energy economy. We need a moonshot. We need to think big and bold. What we're seeing day after day from the international community is incremental suicide. Well, on that cheery note, let's go to John and hear his report from the conference today.
So, Energy Day at COP27. I took in two presentations, one at the Swedish pavilion and the other at the Tajikistan pavilion. But before I talk about that, I wanted to go over the map that I presented earlier at the beginning of COP that showed the participating nations, or at least the nations that had pavilions at COP27. Now, what I'm showing here in green are the nations that have their own dedicated national pavilion, and there are 63 of those. And then the nations shown in yellow are participating through regional pavilions. And Perhaps the most notable of those is the Nordic Pavilion. That's always a very active area with a lot of good information. That's primarily Norway, but it includes the other Scandinavian nations as well. Then Africa is covered by a couple of regional pavilions, so they're included. But you can still see that even with the updated information, we're up to a total of 147 pavilions. And then there are some small booths that are free to small organizations, and there are about 30, 35 of those, and you get those for a week. So there's about 70 participants there. So between the 147 pavilions and the 70 booths, we've got about 217 overall exhibitors this year. That's quite a few. But you can see who's not here. You've got the Russia, sort of Central Asia region down through Iran, Iraq, and Syria. And then you've got Mexico down through much of Central America, and then large part of South America absent, and then a few nations over here in Southeast Asia absent. But pretty good turnout, good representation from most of the nations. As far as the number of people attending this COP, it's a big one. Total of 33,500, and that's split between the official national delegations of the parties, in other words, the Conference of Parties, the actual signatories to the agreement, over 16,000 of their representatives. And that's balanced by primarily the observer organizations, almost 12,000 of them, and then about 3,300 press people. So quite a few media folks here at this conference. Now, the presentation at the Tajik Pavilion was interesting. It was about climate change and its impact upon migration. And particularly they were focusing on Central Asia migration and some of the issues in Tajikistan. Tajikistan is interesting in that it's a nation that receives a disproportionate amount of its income, its GDP, is derived from its young men outside the country working in other nations and sending money home. For a couple of years there, they were the country that had the largest proportion of their GDP from remittances overseas. So small audience, just a few people in attendance, mostly people associated with the Tajik Pavilion and a few others of us. So it was rather easy for me to have conversations with the people because they were all wondering what the heck I was doing there, since very few other people were participating. Now, the first speaker was Banerjee, and he is responsible in Europe, Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, and Central Asia for migration. There's actually an international organization for migration, and he's leading up a lot of these efforts. So clearly, the international community is seeing that migration for various reasons is ramping up, and they're trying to get a handle on it before it gets completely out of hand. He said that there was the expectation of 5 to 8 million people in Central Asia moving because of climate change, but the place that's really threatened by this is Africa, and they can anticipate upwards of 85 million in a climate crisis. Now, the primary speaker was this gentleman, Sultan Rezi Morzoda from Tajikistan, and he has a lot of responsibility in Tajikistan for water issues. And he talked about how Tajikistan generates 66% of the water for the entire region of Central Asia. So it has a lot of mountains, a lot of glaciers, and a lot of glacial melt. And 93% of Tajikistan is mountainous, and only 7% is available for habitation and agriculture. And he was quite proud of the fact that since 2005, they've increased the number of people in Tajikistan with access to water and sanitation from 50% up to 70%. And he also told a story about how entire villages move when something as basic as an irrigation pump fails. They have no resources to fix it themselves, and they hardly even harass the government into doing it. But eventually the government figures out that there's a problem there, and they repaired the pump, and the entire village a year later moved back. So they had an entire village evacuate their community because of an irrigation failure, and then return once it was taken care of. Amazing story. Now, Dr. Kumari from the World Bank was talking about some of the drivers of climate migration. And she said that water is the primary factor. They've developed simulation models for various scenarios that might put people into motion. And they pointed out that water is the primary stressor that makes people move, because it has cascading effects through the economy and creating social disorder. So it's a primary issue that has to be addressed. Now, this fellow was promoting a water conference that's going to be held in Tajikistan in 2023. And he was also discussing how they're having trouble getting water issues addressed formally in the negotiations of this COP and other COPs, but that we're making progress on the issue. So it was an interesting presentation. I had some interesting conversations with the people afterward, and looking forward to going back there and visiting with them again. Now, the Swedish Pavilion, that was a presentation about water and agriculture as well. And it was a small group, few Egyptians in attendance, and a few other folks. The Egyptian representative was talking about how the majority of water use in Egypt is for agriculture. 80% of all the water resources in Egypt are used for agriculture. Now, in a place, say like Florida, where I'm from, and the U.S. in general, it's more on the order of 50%. So 80% is quite high. But then they have a large number of people employed in the agricultural sector, 24% of their entire population, whereas in a place like the U.S., it's extremely low, something like 2%. And because water is so critical to them, and agriculture is so important, they were discussing renewable energies and how to apply it to agriculture. And they have to drive the cost down to make it affordable for their market and their agricultural industries. And one of the issues is long-term storage. Now, one of the mechanisms for storing solar energy is, in fact, fresh water. If fresh water is at a premium and you rely upon desalination to produce some of your water, then that in effect becomes a mechanism by which during high power availability, you can desalinate large quantities of water and then simply store the water for later use. So any excess power can be utilized in that manner because it's not really time dependent. However, for the other elements of agriculture, your traditional power needs and greenhouse facilities and refrigeration and processing and so on, it does require energy storage. And they were trying to determine at what point the progress on long-term storage of renewable energy, of electricity, would be cheap enough to be applicable in Egypt for agriculture. And they were also discussing a private sector model for this investment, which I'm not sure that an awful lot of countries have taken that route for agriculture, because it's typically agricultural investments on water and infrastructure are a national priority and a shared investment provided by the government. So it was an interesting talk. I'm not sure how what potential they have, and at what point the cost of long-term storage will drop low enough to be applicable for their situation in Egypt. But the United States, for its part, I attended a session last year, where the head of the U.S. Department of Energy was talking about how the United States, for its part, has taken on that challenge and is setting a goal of within the next 10 years, I guess within the next 9 years now, of driving down the cost of energy storage, long-term energy storage, by 90%. If we achieve that, then that can have a tremendous benefit around the world, not just for the United States, but for places like Egypt where they're facing this challenge. So, interesting day today. Had several good visits with people throughout the conference, and looking forward to tomorrow.
Thank you, John. So today, protesters swelled from their daily and well-meaning groups numbering about 20 to well over 50. To give you an example, last year in Glasgow, there were over 100,000 people in the street, just saying. But our intrepid reporter, Esteban Rodifili, and videographer Michal waded into the crowd to cover the protests and interview one of the lead organizers, who happens to be Pakistani. Pakistan, as we mentioned earlier this week, is responsible for just 1% of greenhouse gases, but is suffering catastrophic harm due to climate change. That it comes back to the question of loss and damage. Just 2 months ago, Pakistan suffered a monster monsoon that caused flooding, submerging fully 1/3 of the entire country. So you can just imagine the devastation that caused. So let's go to that protest and as Esteban's reporting on the scene.
You have a choice. You have a choice to make right now. At the moment, we have seen no conversation around zero emissions. Our negotiators in there are telling us all they're hearing is that there is zero empathy, there is zero compassion. For many of us, we are fatigued. We are tired. We are tired of fighting. We are tired of seeing no action. If you want something to come out of this, then there has to be an end to fossil fuels. We need to see phase out of fossil fuels in the context this year if you are serious about getting us on a pathway towards 1.5. I'm sorry. Fossil fuel out! Fossil fuel out! When I say for people and planet, you say fossil fuel out! For people and planet! Fossil fuel out! For people and planet! Fossil fuel out!
Our sacred site, Chaco Canyon, is a World Heritage UNESCO site, much like the pyramids of Egypt, but they are under attack because of the fossil fuel extraction that is encroaching on our sacred places. We indigenous people are not separate from the land. We are not separate from the water, and we are not separate from our air. We have resisted colonialism since first contact. I'm here wearing my traditional clothing as a relic of the values that my indigenous peoples have. We are fighting against the fossil fuel industries that are lining their pockets with the resources that are stolen from our landscapes. They are not only stealing our precious relatives, but they are also stealing our sisters, because fossil fuels also brings in oil and gas workers, men. That is man camps. Man camps are stealing, kidnapping, and desecrating the sacredness of our women. If you were here earlier, you would see all of our indigenous sisters wearing red to remind the fossil fuel corporations that they are stealing our women, and we are saying no more.
Good morning. We are here with Farouk Tariq. He's one of the leaders of today's protest. How do you do?
Okay, fine, thank you. How do you do?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having us. So we were wondering if you could provide to our audience a little bit of the context of your protest and what organization do you belong to, your objectives.
I am from Pakistan Kisan Rabta Committee, which is Pakistan Peasants Coordination Committee, part of Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development, APMDD. I came here from Lahore to protest on the issue of these devastating floods and also the rains which has taken over almost 1/3 of Pakistan, and that has made life of over 33 million people miserable. They were impacted by this climate disaster. So we came here to raise several issues. Today issue was really fossil fuel, and I come from a country where fossil fuel over 64% energy is being produced by fossil fuels and only 6% by renewable energy. So Pakistan has is been dependent on LNG, on gas, on oil and on coal. So these are all providing this fossil fuel bad impact on the people's life. So that's what I came here to raise the issue, that government should change and change their priority from fossil fuel to renewable energy.
Wonderful. And the protest today, was it just one organization, or was it a group of
It was
organizations?
a group of organizations who are all together against fossil fuel, and this was a joint demonstration. And we had a demonstration yesterday as well and before as well. So every day we are protesting here because this is the only opportunity we can bring our message to a wider audience. People are listening, but a lot of filming is been made, and through social media and through media our message is spread. So what we can't do inside, we are doing outside.
Can you give do you recall some of the organizations that are involved in this protest?
Yes, there is a fossil fuel. There is a global network on climate change. There is a fossil fuel free world, and there is a Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development, which many organizations are part of that organization, and several other from Africa and from America, and there was a Polish organization as well.
One more follow-up question. So, have you encountered difficulties in protesting in Egypt?
Okay, I come from a country which has been ruled by military dictatorship for 32 years, and I have been arrested many times in Pakistan just to raise our voice for democracy. So when I come here where there is no freedom, there is no democracy, and a COP is taking place here, but COP is mainly a talking shop really for the ruling elite. It's not really, it's a greenwash. I don't think anything concrete will come out of it until there is a mass movement inside Egypt and around the world. But the problem is that there was a demonstration which was cancelled in Cairo, permission was withdrawn, and we also see here I can't take name of America, I can't take name of China. I've been warned 2 times today and yesterday why I'm saying IMF, why I'm saying World Bank. So why can't we say IMF and World Bank? What security it brings that we cannot take name of countries? Those who are polluter, they should be named. Those who are spreading dirty energy, we should name them. And that's the issue here inside, that you don't name, you just say north. North is very broad, very vague term. So is south. Now Saudi Arabia, can we say Saudi Arabia is south? Can we say China is south? But we know American imperialism, we know about their atrocities, but we also have countries in south who are playing the same role what American and British and European imperialism has played. So we are here in a country where there is a dictatorship, where there is no freedom of expression. It's a very limited chance what we can do. Yesterday I was warned why I said US imperialism. Today I just warned when I came out of the thing that your badge can be withdrawn. So let's see what happened, but I said what I have to say. So let's see, we are used to fighting dictatorships, so here I am.
Brilliant. Is there anything you would like to add for our audience?
Yes, I think that a mass movement against fossil fuel has to be built, and also a mass movement against the imperialist exploitation has to be linked with this. All things are linked together. Climate justice, fight against fossil fuel, fight for clean water, fight for a decent life, they're all together. and we are working for a decent, equitable world. And that's the problem, that many of dictatorship who are providing opportunities to the rich become more rich. There are corporate sector who are using every crisis to make more money. So crisis is an opportunity for them to be more rich. So we are here to raise our voices. I hope that our voice has been heard.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Esteban. And thank you, Michael. So Michael's photo collage today covers various aspects of the conference, including this morning's protests, but also various pavilions around the conference. So let's go to Michael's video reporting.
I started my day at COP by being greeted by this lady who was having a sign with President Sisi. I wasn't really sure what was that about. I didn't want to talk to her, and I cannot read Arabic. And later on, few people asked her what she was doing there, and she was just saying that Sisi is the best guy in the world, she loves Sisi, and so on. My guess is that she was standing there to get some attention of the photojournalist, so maybe she makes it to some newspapers in one of the images. Then there were these vegan protesters, probably 5 or 6 of them every day. They also had a press conference, so were inviting everybody to their press conference. And then I got in, and there was a protest of this size, probably I would guess 50 people. That's the usual scale at this COP, something around 50 to maybe 100 people max. Here are images of some of the faces, and I saw a lot of determination. I guess this face says it all. There was also, I would say, quite a bit of dedication, because this girl has a permanent tattoo of the Climate Justice Now slogan. So for her, it's really a lifetime mission. Topic-wise, today it was about 2 or actually 3 topics. It was ACE in a civil society and also an energy day. I took this shot in the US pavilion, so you can see the program of the US pavilion. Sometimes there is an overlap of topics. Many of the panels were led by females today, so it was related to, I would guess, if I didn't know that it was an energy day and civil society, I would say it was a gender day, like it was yesterday. I headed to the civil society pavilion and did not really have much luck there, because the presentations were in Arabic and I could not understand a single word, so took just few images there, and that's about it what I can report on events in the in this pavilion. I heard a lot of noise. It was coming from the Brazilian pavilion, and if I had a pavilion here myself, I really wouldn't want to have it next to the Brazilians, because they are loud. There is so much music going on. I think this was some rap session. It almost felt like a karaoke. So Brazilians are definitely the loudest in this COP. So many indigenous people today. Many of them arrived for week 2. You can meet them all the time. Here they were just having some discussions in the US pavilion with the delegates there. And here would be one shot from a pavilion where there was a panel on ACE. In the morning, I asked a few people on the bus, what does this ACE stand for? What is it? And nobody really knew. So let me say that it's an abbreviation for Action on Climate Empowerment, and it seems like a pretty new topic. My overall feel was that most of the pavilions focused on energy, because that seemed to me like the main topic of the day, much more than the civil society. Here will be a shot from the Swedish pavilion, where they were discussing how energy could be stored and combined heat and power for sustainable agriculture. This will be an image of the setup, because they just had laptops there on the floor, showing it on the big screen in the background. Then for some reason their pavilion started to fall fell apart. They had to bring a drill and they had to fix it. The technician had to fix it. So energy was needed there as well. The most interesting session I attended today was on fusion. They were making the case that it's the cleanest energy and we are just getting very close to reaching the stars. There was also David Livingston, senior advisor to Special Presidential Envoy John Kerry. So my guess is that US is taking the fusion very seriously. Quick glimpse to the Japanese pavilion. They always go with the topic of the day, so today it was all about energy, very nicely and neatly organized, like you would expect from the Japanese. The most artistic pavilion of the day is definitely Turkey. They have their various arts which is created from waste material. This would be a detail of an eye, and this would be the very same image from a longer distance. The waste material used are plastic bags or aluminum tins. Here would be on the left, these are also expired drugs. So pretty cool approach, visually very attractive. They were actually creating the art on the spot. They offered me to glue pieces of the waste material of the textile there as well, but I just took some images. That's what I do here. Yet another image from the Turkish pavilion. There is a lot of digitalization going on. It looks, some of the art looks amazing. My attention caught this presentation, which was some sort of a virtual pointer, so you could experience digital marbling experience. Very nice. Highly recommend to try things like that. Eventually I kept walking around and ended in the Qatar pavilion, where I saw this gentleman in the middle. It's Dr. Hoesung Lee, IPCC chair, a scientist I very highly respect, and one of the panelists was Dr. Abdullah Moqsit, which is IPCC secretary, who, by the way, is one of the authors of the weather forecasting model Aladdin. So I took few images with these scientists, and that was one of the highlights of my day. The downside of this session was that it was in the Qatar pavilion, and the questions that were asked were so basic. It felt like on the level of a high school, and these are the top lead scientists, leading authors of the IPCC assessment report. So I was truly disappointed by the level of the questions or the difficulty of the questions these scientists were asked. Eventually I ran into yet another protest. This one was a little bit bigger. I would estimate maybe 200 people or so. The protesters were watched by security guys. The security guys kept their distance, but they also kept a close eye that things don't go out of hand. There was a lot of energy in the protests. Yeah, another image of just people delivering their speeches, and a lot of energy there. And initially I wanted to end my show today, or my presentation, with this image showing the energy that is in these people, but I changed my mind because then this presenter on the right hand side came up and had delivered her speech, and she basically had an emotional meltdown. She was crying, having very difficult time say things that she was saying. She was really breaking down there. I was not sure at first if it was just for the masses or if it was sincere, so I followed her, and I have to report that it was very sincere. The girl was crying for another maybe 20 minutes. So this is my last image of the day, which should show how climate change can look like, what sort of an influence it has on people, and it's a huge problem in many lives.
Folks, we sign off today with the words of 17-year-old Swedish activist Greta Thunberg. Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope, but I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. I want you to act. I want you to act as if the world was in crisis. I want you to act as if the house was on fire, because it is. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.